Welcome, guys. We're super, super excited to have you in the webinar today. This is now our third year doing the webinar about the fee increase or stack or changes. So, yeah, this is a very, very different webinar from the ones that we have been having in the past or running in the past. Today, I'm joining Chelsea. Well, we are running this together as usual, which is pretty exciting. And yeah, we'd love to hear more, like in the meantime.
We'll be talking about
Uh,
tariffs too, because even though the fee stack has been a little bit cooled off, we thought we were going to have a conversation around make hay while the sun shines. Things are great. There's no fee stack. So how do you get ahead? Now we're going to talk about tariffs, and there's a new tariff stack. So I did a deep dive on that over the past, couple of days and wrapped my head around it. So we'll talk a little bit about that.
yeah, exactly. That's literally what have happened. Like when we designed this, we met like, I don't know, at the beginning of the year, and it was a completely different landscape. So that's very exciting. Uh, I love what Tony said. Excited in these crazy epic times. Yeah, it's epic. Everything is so incredible, incredibly interesting and changing. But yeah, for the ones of you that haven't answered the poll, please do, and tell us also in the chat where you're connecting from. We'd love to know where you're based. Chelsea and I are in Austin, which is so funny. We live here like in the same city, and we never do the webinars in the same like
Mhm.
space. So yeah, it still feels like we're far apart. So the way this is gonna work, guys, I'm gonna give you the agenda. I'm gonna start running the overview of what have changed and what are the differences. Remember that if you are here, probably, hopefully, you downloaded the PDF, right? Our white paper that it's called Hustling Margins. So in that white paper, what we covered was because there is a freeze on the FBA fees, there's no increase this year, or there was not an increase this year. We were approaching that from an angle of, okay, what are we going to do to grow our profit margins, right? Our bottom line. It's like not so much on the growth and the revenue, it's more how can we improve the margins? And then with everything that happened and changed with other different, I guess, fees and with tariff that kind of changed a little bit. So what we're gonna focus today is really what changed and what are the things that we can do to approach those changes. We're not gonna cover, I'm not gonna explain to you the FBA fees that didn't change and then other fees that didn't change. That is not relevant. It's everything about what changed and what's the impact. So the freeze opportunity, which I still think it is an opportunity for us to be able to improve our margins. Then strategies for margin improvement. Chelsea will cover cash flow management, which is the one of the most incredible approaches that you can do to your bottom line. Scaling unique economics, and obviously we are gonna cover tariff navigation, even though it's still a huge question mark in the landscape, but we're gonna touch on that because we know that is very important. So if we go to the next slide, you will see this cool like ChatGPT image where we on one end we were praying and doing everything to increase our bottom line, and then on the other side, which a lot of hope, right? Like that's what we wanted to do and hoping to do in this freeze. But then with everything that's happened with the tariff, that's a lot of chaos, a lot of fear in the space. And for today's webinar, we're not gonna focus on the fear. We already know that there is a lot of uncertainty out there. So we're gonna focus on what we can control. So if we go to the next slide, this is one of the Carbon 6 mantras is we focus on what we can control. And it is extremely important across our organization. And now it's a special focus on our content, right? We're going to focus and we're going to give you the tools that you can use to control your bottom line, to control your profitability, and to control those supply chain movements that you could do to prevent any profit margin erosion. There are many things that we won't be able to give you advice on. There again, we're still living in a moment where very a lot of things are unclear. So that's the work that we're gonna do today. So if we go to the next slide, this is kind of us doing the work, and I have the outline. And at the in this, I guess, beginning part of the presentation, I wanted that to be more like a conversation with Chelsea. I know we're gonna get into a specific nitty-gritty tools, but one of the things, Chelsea, that we talk about when we decided to focus the white paper on the opportunities was we want to do strategies or give people a better perspective on how they can reduce or avoid fees. If there are any things like that, I have a few things that I want to show them about or around AWD. Also, uncover them more profit. And I know that you're touching on that, and also improving cash flow, which is ultimately, by the way, that's another thing. If you stick with us until the end, Chelsea built an amazing thing they call the profit flow. It is the first tool of its kind in the industry. It helps you predict profit and build multiple different scenarios to know what is the most profitable one, and measuring all of the cash flow and all of the things that you want to do. So at the end of the presentation, you're going to be given like a QR code to scan to join the waitlist. And that is one thing. If you participate in this webinar, you're going to have priority over everybody else that is registering that. So yeah, I don't know, Chelsea, if there is any comments on that that you want to touch.
Yeah, this is a tool that I've been working to build. I've been talking about a lot of these things, training, and the thing that I really have seen over the years is that you can train on these things, but the actionability and the implementation is really the key. If you don't have the data and you don't have it organized in such a way and you don't have the strategies, it's really difficult to implement these things. And that has been a failing of the Amazon SaaS community, is that the data is not organized in such a way that it is actionable, right? There's a lot of data out there, but it's not pulled together, it's not compiled, and the strategies aren't built to say, this is your problem. You have a cash flow issue. Here are the ASINs that are causing that, or here's the ASINs that need to be more profitable. Here are the strategies to implement. Here's the first step, here's the next step. And so that's what we've been building over time, is that that documentation of looking at your business in that way, and then also compiling strategies against the data to take what I've been training on for the past 4 years and actually bring it to reality in your business. So that's what we're building. We are in beta right now. As it opens up, we will have the beginnings of that, and then over the year, we will be continuing to develop on that to make it an even more powerful tool in the coming months.
Yeah, I love it. I'm super excited because I've seen the math behind it, and I believe it is so impressive. To a point that I don't know if anybody else is doing, like, making decisions in that way. Because normally when sellers make decisions, it's either I launch 100 units or 200 units. I don't know which one is better. But then you ask, or that tool allows you to ask the question of, like, well, what if you don't launch it, or if you launch it for more, or if you expand the product line, or if you wait for, I don't know, a shipment, especially right now with the tariff situation. And the cool thing is that throughout the whole presentation, we're gonna give you specific tools for specific areas of the business. So I'm gonna start with one of the things, and I know this is not covered in the white paper because it's not necessarily related to bottom line or profitability. But one of the things that I'm a huge fan, and I know this gets a bad rap in the space, but for people that do it correctly, this is a massive, I guess, fee or saver. Like, yeah, I I guess is a fee saver, is the shipping non-product packaging. That is when you send your inventory and you can use your own poly bag or your own box to ship to directly to the end customer with a label or something like that. I love that program. I think you get a lot of like incentive to use it. But not only that, and this is one thing that I've been getting super deep into it with Amazon, working with them, creating content around that. And we're gonna release that video next week, I believe. Is one around the Climate Pledge Friendly program. So if you don't know what that is, they call it the Leaf program. It's basically when you go to Amazon and then in the search results you see a product and then you see a leaf next to it. That means that it's part of the Climate Pledge Friendly program. So shipping, product packaging, and Climate Pledge Friendly, they kind of work together. And one of the things that it is proven, not only I've seen it with sellers that I work with, but also Amazon has the data from third-party organizations that have measured the impact, and obviously they have the data of their own, is the fact that when you have or when you belong to that program or your products are registered in the Climate Pledge Friendly and are inside of the program, the increase in revenue, the increase in velocity goes up at least around, I say, 10%. And they have examples of people going higher than that. And it is insane how just one thing, doing the logistics or I guess the packaging correctly, and Chelsea will touch on that. How do you impact the unique economics based on building your packaging so it's smaller, but also taking in consideration that that helps you with the Climate Pledge Friendly program that directly impacts your revenue, and on top of that, the possibility of shipping in your own packaging to the end customer. So those are the two things that I'm super excited. We have a lot of content around that. We have a few blogs. We're gonna add it to the chat. A few blogs on both programs and the interview that I did with the business developer guy at the Climate Pledge Friendly, where he explains how to get the leave, what are the organizations that you can work with, what are the requirements, and examples on how much people grow their business just by being part of the program.
And we
If
can
we
add
go
that to the worksheet, the workbook as well. We have a workbook that we will be able to give you guys access to. We can add those things to that as well.
Perfect. If you want to go back to the deck, Chelsea.
Yep.
Yeah, oh, by the way, some people were asking that they haven't received the PDF and the white paper. Make sure that the team already sent in the chat the link to get the white paper. So you need to put your email and you will get it. Like I think it takes like 1 or 2 minutes, but yeah, it's there. And you also can in the same page you can download multiple white papers, the things that we have worked on. So as you see in the screen, this is literally what's gonna happen today. You're not only going to get the content with the explanations, but also, as Chelsea mentioned, the workbook with all of the tools. So we have been focused on building actionable tools, things that you can take and use right away. All of those are completely free, and you can use it and make your business better because we want to help you grow. So if you go to the next slide, this is one of the things that changed that I'm going to talk about that impacts the profitability and the way that you manage your promotions, right? So I don't know if you are aware, but in June 2nd, Amazon will start changing or will change, I guess forever, the promotions fee, right? So before the promotions were something that were a flat fee or either a little percentage on each sale. Right now, that have changed depending on the fee. That have changed dramatically. So they're taking a flat fee per day, and also they're taking a percentage. So a lot of people don't understand what this means for their business. And I see that their strategies, and this is something very, very important that I see all the time, in the strategy, they keep doing what they were doing a year ago. And that's probably not serving you the way that you want because you might be bleeding money. So if you scan the QR code or if you go to the website that we're gonna put in the yeah, this website, we're gonna put it in the chat. You can have the calculator that will tell you exactly how much money you're gonna save depending on the amount of units that you add to your deals. And you have the promotion types, I think it's best deal, prime day deals, coupons, and lining deals. Especially now that, Prime Day is coming in July, you need to take that in consideration. And also, take in consideration that a lot of this might impact also on top of your pricing strategies for the increases that you might need to do if the tariff go up. But I'm not gonna yet touch on that because Chelsea's gonna cover it in depth. So this calculator is for you to use, calculate your stuff, and make sure that you're not bleeding money. And this, remember, this it's getting enforced or changed in June 2nd. That's the officially date. So there is some time to prepare, but by before Prime Day, that will change completely. And then the other thing that if we go back, Chelsea, to the deck, this is probably one of the biggest processes and yeah, I guess SOPs that sellers are not completely aware and completely experts on is the mix between sending FBA inbound inventory to use AWD. So for a lot of it, you have seen that Amazon is pressuring sellers to use AWD. Like if you don't use AWD, it's very expensive to send inventory, which in some cases that's true. But right now, with all of the changes that AWD is having, especially in the cost per carton to send inventory and then to replenish to Amazon, it might not be the best option in some cases. So I'm gonna give you this example. We're doing a shipment is 73,000 units. That's what you want to send, and that this is a seller that is preparing for Prime Day, right? If they do the inbound placement fee, which is the minimal, meaning that they gonna get a consolidated amount of addresses to send to different FC warehouses, the cost for that is 23 cents per unit. So at the end, they will be paying $16,000 or almost $17,000 for the placement, right? Which we don't want. But then they might think, oh no, well, let's just use AWD because it's cheaper for storing the AWD. And also, if we send to Amazon, then Amazon won't charge us to send to FBA. And this is where I see a lot of people making the mistake. Sending to AWD costs $2.70 per carton. So this is where your carton distribution comes as a very, very important metric because depending on how you do that, things might be cheaper or more expensive using AWD. So in the case of this seller, the 73,000 units, those are arranged in cartons of 4 units per carton. So because of that, it's costing them 63 cents per unit to send through AWD to FBA. So that is almost $46,000. And, I mean, what's best? Like 46,000 or 16,000? Obviously 16,000. But then the other option, and I know this is not applicable for a lot of sellers sending inventory in cartons that are with diverse SKUs. But if you send cartons and, boxes with the exact same SKU, with the exact same unit count per carton, you can do the $5 rule and do the optimize where Amazon charges you $0 to send to FBA. There is no inbound placement fee just because there are at least 5 boxes with the exact same count that you can send to FBA. So in this case, for this particular example, it works perfect, right? Because sellers can now send a lot of inventory. Again, this is not applicable for everybody. Oh, perfect. Lynn asked the question, what is the $5 rule? Basically, Amazon, when they remove, so there was before this one, there was another um, inbound placement option that it was called the partial, where you could partially distribute and send inventory, and they charge you less. They removed that, and the only one that they left, well, the minimal, obviously, but then they optimize. It's in order to be charged zero, you need to have at least 5 boxes, and in those 5 boxes needs to have the exact same arrangement of SKUs. So, for example, if you are sending 2 SKUs, right, in each box there is 2 SKUs A, 2 SKUs B, you need to have the exact same distribution in all 5 cartons or 5 boxes to be granted the optimized rule, right, where they don't charge you for that. So for some people, this might be just to first rearrange their cartons. So instead of sending multiple different things without a rule to FBA and using placement minimal or AWD, you can literally consolidate things in a carton. Like in the example in this seller, there are 4 units per carton, right? And it's consistent across all of their cartons. So they are able to get that, I guess, savings, and Amazon just don't charge them for that. Uh, for people that have diverse catalogs, this is probably very hard, especially resellers and things like that. I don't know if you want to add anything to that, Chelsea.
Yeah, so when you've got an order, if you have a product that's, let's say, a slower seller, it has a high number of units per carton, and that would be, let's say, 6 months worth of inventory to do a 5 box split. And then there was a question, what is the maximum size? 150 units per carton. So if you have,
But then size for a carton is 25 times 25
oh,
and
maximum
25, right?
size. Yes, 25 on any one side.
Yeah.
In terms of the units per carton, it's 150 units per carton is the max. So if you
Yeah.
have a bunch of products where doing 5 boxes or more is going to make sense, and then you have one or two products where 5 cartons, maybe 6 or 7 months of inventory, split that out so that you're creating a shipment that has only products that have the 5 box rule implemented. And then you could do a separate shipment where you are not following the 5 box rule, and only those are going to incur that extra fee, that extra inbound fee. If you include those products and you do less than 5 boxes, the entire shipment is going to be assigned with that fee. So you can separate those out. So you're only paying the fee on those that you want to send less than 5 boxes.
Yeah. Yeah. So I guess that answered the question. And then the last thing, if we go to the next slide, the other part is the table, right? Like you can use AWD, and that benefit is that lower storage cost, lower than FBA. I don't know if that's necessarily lower than your 3PL. And it also has auto replenish, which allows to replenish inventory to FBA once you get to a specific threshold. So the example is to send a lot of inventory to AWD and have that in order to supply your FBA needs. Again, the example that I gave you is against AWD. So if we need to make a decision, obviously minimal or the placement is better than AWD. But in some cases, AWD is a better option. So you need to make those calculations and you need to see which one is better, calculate that. And I think with the profit tool, you're gonna be able to see that. Then optimize placement. This will reduce the inbound fees, right? But then you will send inventory directly to FBA or the inbound minimal. So the optimized placement is when you pay zero for the 5 box rule. And then the minimal is when you have diverse cartons, diverse SKUs, and then you need to send a rush order with multiple SKUs to FBA. So depending on what is your goal, these different options are available. But again, if we plan with enough time and enough like vision to what's going to happen in the future, then we can be able to manage that profit margin, and Amazon not like eating everything just in inbound placement. So yeah, I'm gonna pass it to you, Chelsea.
Absolutely. So let me go ahead and I actually have some little show and tell here. So I wanted to get into first and foremost talking about scale because uh, scale is what we all want to do, but a lot of times we don't really know what that means exactly. It's not just increasing revenue, it's not just to launch new products. Scale is actually broken down into two elements. And those elements, it's similar to, let's say, talking about sales. Sales, the two elements of sales are traffic and conversion. Similarly, with scale, we're looking at profit and cash flow and the way that those work together. So I wanted to talk about that, going over the profit side of things a bit, and then talking about cash flow. How do you increase your cash flow without doing outside funding? For example, there's cash that's sitting in your business. How can you leverage that? How can you adjust things, the actual structure of your business and the way that you think of your business and the resources that you have to make some strategic tweaks that will actually significantly improve your profitability, your cash flow, and your ability to scale. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about is something called unit economics. That is getting to, on a granular level, what is the profitability? What are the costs involved with selling a specific ASIN? Um, what is your landed cost, right? Your cost per unit to your supplier, as well as your shipping costs. And now, of course, factoring in the increase in tariffs is going to affect your unit economics. What are those things, and what is the profit that comes out of that at the end of the day? One of the things that is not necessarily factored in all the time is the storage costs, so the storage fees accumulate over time. So that's something that we've worked out inside of our profit flow, is to understand what is the final financial impact of storage fees over time, and how do you keep an eye on that so that you can reduce those. We've called it, for several years, we've called it profit killers, because they're those secret fees that creep up that we don't necessarily have our eyes or attention on. So that helps to it reduces our profit, and then it also negatively impacts our cash flow, because every month we get that storage bill that comes out of our cash flow to reduce the amount of profit that we're making.
Yeah,
So,
and that's one thing a lot of people, so from the poll that we run, 68% of the people in the webinar are saying that the storage fees and the H inventory fees are the ones that are that they need the most help with, because
mhm,
again, they're very hard to calculate because all of the different formulas and stuff. And I know that you have done a great job with that on all of the calculators.
Yeah, absolutely. And a couple of people mentioned screen share. I'm definitely going to be sharing my screen. I'm going to kind of be going back and forth. We like this kind of more conversational aspect to it, but I go into a lot of these nitty-gritty details, it's one of those things that you can't just talk about it. You have to show it, because it's a lot of numbers and it's very heady. So I'll definitely be doing screen share. First, I wanted to actually show a couple of things. In terms of profit, there's one thing that you can do, and Vanessa touched on it. It's really regarding packaging and product size. And then also, I love that she brought up ships in product packaging and the climate pledge, because Amazon gives additional incentives. They discount the fulfillment fees when you have those additional programs. So there's specific rules around that. And again, we'll supply that information with the resources that you guys will gain. But here's a really good example that I really like of a business that made those changes. This was the product that they had before. this was the change that they made. The same exact product, and it moved from a, um, a fee category of large standard to small standard. It saved around, I believe it's, and I'm going to do a screen share real quick. It saved a significant amount of money for this company. And so that's an area that you can save. It will reduce in a couple of areas. Do I have the screen share?
Yeah, it's showing.
Okay,
I
okay,
see
good.
it. The resource savings. Yep.
Okay, perfect. So it went from large standard to small standard, and that influenced a lot of different things. Inbound placement, it influenced the fulfillment fee by 62 cents per unit. And across the entire catalog, because they had several different products that were repackaged, they end up saving $54,000 a year. That's where you start to get not just additional profit, but additional cash flow, because every time you get paid, you're making more money. You're making more money back because the fulfillment fees are lower. And then if they got into low inventory level fees, they would save 5 cents per unit as well. So resizing, and that's not even mentioning the storage side of things. Resizing a product will have impact on nearly every Amazon fee that you come into contact with, except for referral fees. Size definitely matters significantly. Fulfillment fees are high. So if you even went into a product that ships in their own product packaging, you'll get even an additional bump in terms of the savings for fulfillment fees. And then when we're talking on the subject of storage, like I mentioned, you'll get a savings on storage, but you also have to have a strategy to mitigate the storage fees, to keep an eye on them, and to be able to avoid them before they hit. I'm not going to go into too much detail on this side of the business. I've talked about this a lot. There's webinar replays from last year that talk about this in more detail and strategies, but I always have to share my favorite report for aged inventory and really for anything inventory related is the FBA inventory report. And that's the path up here, gives the path to that report. At the end of it, you're going to see the age of the inventory. So you can see on an ASIN level what inventory is currently incurring fees starting at 180 days. And then there's a big jump in those fees when it comes to 9 months. So at 270 days, the fees go from 150 cents per cubic foot to $5.45 per cubic foot. It's a huge change. So anything over this amount is incurring a lot of fees because the fees go up every single month. Here at when you're over a year old, you're paying $6.90 per cubic foot, and that's on top of the normal storage fees. Amazon likes to stack fees, so that's on top of that. This has produced a lot of fees so far. And then these are what I call time bombs. These are about to blow up in your face because they're about to jump into that $5.45 per cubic foot. So keeping an eye on these and having a plan as soon as you see these, you want to have an aggressive plan to handle them. And again, we're not going to go into strategy because I talk about that in another webinar, which you guys can have access to. There's a link to all of our webinars from the past years. And then you just want to have a plan for that. And then once those things are under control, working on this area so that it takes a while to move inventory. It's not necessarily going to be overnight. And thinking that you want to remove that inventory, it's usually more expensive to do that. So your marketing team should have an eye on this. Your inventory team should be preparing reports and pointing them out on a regular basis. Say, hey, what are you guys doing to market this? Do you have a strategy? Are you going to drop the price? Is there a strategy to market this so that the marketing team can take more responsibility over profitability and not just revenue? In terms of an impact, we were working with an eight-figure seller, and over a 2 month period of time, we were able to isolate a number of fees that were causing them to in real time, these were fees that they were incurring, and then on this edge of things, and then these were our projections. We were projecting on this red line that this is what they were going to be incurring on a monthly basis over time. And we were able to help to navigate that so that they could target specific products to reduce their fees by a certain percentage over that time, just by targeting those fees on those ASINs. And their trajectory changed from $43,000 to $32,000 over the series of a year worth of projections. So their savings was significant, and you can start to see how just creating a plan for this, a lot of times can be out of sight, out of mind, and then all of a sudden you can get hit with these large fees and not realize them. So that has been a mission of ours over the past couple of years, is to help sellers to have the visibility in this and to get a handle on that, to create strategies around it. All right, and then let's talk a little bit about tariffs. I know this is something that a lot of people want to better understand. We've actually launched a blog post. This went live today, so we wanted to make sure that we got it out today. It's going to be changing over time. There's been a lot of changes, and there's a lot of confusion around tariffs specifically. So digging in, it's the tariff system is a stacked system. Most of us are sourcing from China, and so we hear of all these fees. There were the fees from before. There are the fees that were recently released. We heard 125% fees. We heard 145% fees. So this goes in and it actually breaks all of that down. What are those fees? I've organized them in such a way that it makes more sense than what's happening right now, which is just a lot of partial data. So this helps to break that down and give you a picture of how do the China fees work? What's happening with all of these things? Why are these things being done? And, kind of the backstory of what is the universal tariff? What is the reciprocal tariff? Which countries are actually affected? And what are those deadlines where you're going to see those things happen? So this is a very valuable resource to understand this. I very much recommend going through this, even more so if you're not necessarily as interested as to do a deep dive. You just want to know, what am I actually looking at in terms of the fee impact? We've put together a calculator, so you can select the country of origin for your products. You can select your base duty rate, and then your tariff. This is just a China tariff, right? These are just for China. If you remember, in 2018, we went from not having specific tariffs to all of a sudden tariffs being increasing. You probably remember that if you're selling in 2018, 2020, that sort of thing. I actually got my business audited to look at my catalog around 2019 and was being charged. I went from 0% tariff, and then all of a sudden I was paying 25%. So this had a large effect on a lot of businesses, and a lot of businesses just simply had to absorb that cost. A lot of these are static. You've got the base duty rate, you've got this China tariff from 2018, and then you've got the new tariffs. So you'll read about that, but all of these go into the calculator, and some of these are flat rates, some of these are fees that apply across the board, and then the place that you have some wiggle room is with this fee, because they are stacking fees. This is the one fee that you can start to assess. Am I in that higher range? Like my products, some of my products were. I went from 25%. I got audited by a professional, which will give you a resource for that as well. I got audited by a professional and went from 25% tariff to 10% legally. And that's why you want a professional to look at this, because they can legally see if your product is classed correctly, if there's another way to class your product, kind of like you have a tax accountant properly class your expenses to pay as little tax as possible in a legal way. So this is an area where you can see a lot of people, myself included, I started selling in 2014, relied on our suppliers to pick the code, the classification for products. So that presents an opportunity if you haven't had that looked at.
Also, it's worth mentioning too, especially with what's happening right now with the tariff. Be very careful if your supplier is choosing your like HTS code
Mm-hmm.
because they might be changing, to get away with specific things. They might be changing some codes and some things that at the end of the day, once that inventory is in the port and when you're getting charged, and if that gets investigated, then you can get in trouble. So
Yep.
again, like recommending like to work with a professional. Obviously, the professional has the incentive to help you lower that bill. uh, don't rely on your supplier to lower that bill. Like
Yeah.
it might get very like blurry very fast, very gray area. We know how the Chinese work in that regard. So, if don't we're not we don't want to promote that type of behavior
Yep.
because the implications of avoiding specific taxes might be very, very bad for businesses and people like in the coming months with this. So be
Yep.
mindful of that.
Exactly. Yeah. Be very careful. Work with someone who's been trained to do this. And yes, I'll share a resource. Tammy asked if I have a resource. Be very careful with that. They're going to be cracking down even more, doing more audits, and it can expose you to additional audits of back shipments. So definitely want to work with a professional. And to that point. This is who I worked with. This is his name is Afrolabi. His company is Hanu, and we can supply the link in uh, in those resources. And he shares some stories of results he was actually able to get. This is not going to get rid of those new taxes, but it can adjust that tax called Section 301 tax, basically the taxes from 2018 that were introduced. So he has case studies that you can check out. And like I said, he was able to reduce my own personal um, tariff liabilities. So very, very knowledgeable. He's stayed up on all this. He's been doing this for 25 years. He's been running logistics and sourcing and warehousing for 25 years. So very reputable. He speaks on a lot of webinars and podcasts as well. So you might see him around. All right. So I think we wanted to talk about that. So yeah, so we're talking about the tariff audits. Beyond tariff audits, I wanted to get into a little bit of some tips, and these are tips that are kind of started going around only the past couple of days through some trusted industry uh, pros, and we went through and validated these in the tariffs document. So we talk about it in more detail in this blog post that we put out. But there's something called duty drawback. So if you have a product, and there's a very specific way to do it, so that's laid out in the post as well. But there is something called duty drawback, where if you took some inventory and you brought it into the U.S. and let's say it wasn't selling, or you decided you're going to export a portion of it to Canada, or you're going to destroy it because it's collecting storage fees and um, it's not really making you any money. It's costing you more than it's making. You can actually claim back up to 99% of the duty that you paid on that particular product. You need documentation, you need to file something, a piece of paperwork before you make that export or destroy. And then you need to be able to have that run with customs. So there is a process. If you're going to get back a small amount, you may or may not want to go into that process. But if we're talking about real big chunks of money, it's definitely something that you should know about. so that you can recover that cash and put more profit back into your business. Something to look into. And then there's something called bonded warehouses. These bonded warehouses, they are customs bonded. So it's a special kind of a warehouse. And you're going to want to know that you're working with an actual bonded warehouse. Again, you can talk to someone like, Afulabi from Hanu or someone else who is a customs broker. You ask them, what is a bonded warehouse? How can I look into this? What are the fees involved? But basically, what that is you're taking the product from the port and it's going into this bonded warehouse and you're delaying your tariff payments. You're able to, let's say you have 3 months worth of inventory. If it's in this bonded warehouse, you're only paying when you ship out from that warehouse. So you can send the first month to Amazon and you're only paying the tariff on that first month. And then when you send that next batch, you're paying the tariff on that next batch and so forth. So you're not avoiding the tariff, but you are delaying that payment, which is really can be really good for cash flow. So these are just a couple of things that have come up as strategies that some of the larger sellers are looking into that are worth looking into.
This is incredible. One thing, while you change slides,
Mhm.
somebody asked, like, how will these new tariffs change the impact of cost of goods sellers entering loss and damage reimbursements? And I love this question because this won't change their cost of goods. So if you remember for the reimbursement policy, they changed it. They officially completely changed it on March 31st. That was the day where everything went to the new policy. And that means that Amazon is reimbursing you on the cost of goods, meaning the price the manufacturer is charging you to produce that product. Let's say that I work with a manufacturer and they charge me $2 to produce a specific product. On top of that, I pay for the freight to take it, let's say from China to the US. And on top of that freight, I need to pay the tariff and duties and all of that, and then the inbound fees that are accounted to send to FBA and the shipping fees and all of that. All of those different fees that happen after your manufacturer produced the inventory are not accounted for the cost of goods on the Amazon reimbursement policy.
Mm.
So this will create a huge thing on the reimbursements because if you're paying 140 whatever percent or whatever it is at the end of the day for tariff, that won't be reimbursed to you if Amazon loses your inventory. So no tariff, no duties, no shipping. They do not cover those fees on the new reimbursement policy. It's just the cost of goods of your the thing that your manufacturer sent you. By the way, just like FYI, that's one of the impacts where you need to be very careful or be very aware that that's gonna happen. Um, and yeah, they haven't claimed anything that they're changing anything on their end, like on Amazon's end, to account for the increase. So yeah,
Yeah, that's a good question.
yeah.
All right, I think we went through this. So the next thing I wanted to kind of dive into was something that is referred to as the velocity of money. There's a couple of different terms that you can hear in association with it, but that goes into cash flow. And the whole idea is that the faster you move, the faster you scale up your business. If I can make if I can profit $1 for every dollar within 2 months and it takes you 3 months, I'm going to scale faster, right? I'm going to win because I'm making my money work harder for me. So this gives an example of the same profit, but an increase in how quickly I turn over my money, right? And we're going to talk about what are some of the strategies to do that. So you can see the impact that that can make over time is very significant. It's not just you're talking about exponential growth rather than linear growth, right? So In that respect, there's something called the cash conversion cycle. It's also, you might see it as CCC or triple C. The cash conversion cycle is how quickly am I getting my money back? When I am selling my product, how quickly am I getting my money back? How quickly is my money turning over? So this is represented with a formula, and that formula looks at your days of supply and then adds your receivable days, which most people, it's from Amazon, right? We don't necessarily have a lot of control over this, which is why I put an X. You may have an account that, turns over that where Amazon pays you every 14 days. Amazon may hold back additional inventory. Some accounts they hold back 30% and they keep that in reserve. So that number can vary a little bit, but there's not a lot of changes that we can make. So it looks at those two, it adds those together, and then it deducts the number of days it takes before you have to pay your vendors, your suppliers, your freight forwarders. So the days of supply and the payable days are the two things that we have control over. So those are going to be the two things that I'm kind of going to jump into and talk about what are the strategies involved in that. So like I said, Amazon, if you're at 30%, if your inventory is being held back about 30%, then your receivable days are approximately 18 days. In this scenario, we can say I'm holding 90 days of supply. I get paid every 18 days, as an average, and then I have to pay my supplier back 60 days after I place that order. The formula ends up being around 48 days is your cash flow conversion cycle. That's how quickly you're turning over your cash. The lower the number, the better. So that's what you're shooting for is a low number. So you have those metrics that you can actually influence. If you're, let's say, 75 days of supply, now that gets into wanting to avoid stockouts, but you say, I'm keeping 75 days of supply on hand. That's something that I can control. If you have if you're moving, let's say you're moving some of your product over to being manufactured closer, the risks involved in things going wrong and running out of stock is less when you have a shorter lead time. So if you are going to start sourcing in the US or in Mexico, for example, you might have a shorter window of lead time. So you might want to look at, is it possible to turn that inventory over faster and keep lower number of supply, send in smaller orders more frequently. The other thing you can control is payment terms. So negotiating with your supplier, instead of paying you every 60 days, I want to pay you every 90 days. That may or may not be possible. I'll talk about another strategy for adjusting this to help with your cash flow. So if you're looking at 90 days of supply, 90 days of payable, then you're about 18 days that you're looking for in terms of what your conversion rate is. And then if you do both of those things, you're looking at a 3-day cash conversion cycle. It's a lot faster. It's very aspirational, but this is just to show you how you can look at ways to tighten up that cash conversion cycle, to think differently about your business and just structure it differently so that even if you don't increase your profit or don't increase your revenue, you're still increasing your ability to scale faster. So here is an example. Wanted to go over an example of, oh wait. First and foremost, I actually wanted to talk about, so if you have, okay, here we go. So here's an example of sometimes it might make sense to increase your cash conversion cycle, even if you are going to reduce your profit a little bit. Here's an example of two competing products. One of these products is selling 50 units a month and is at $11 and basically $11. This one is selling at $10, so it's $1 less, and it's selling 400 units a month. They both have similar amounts of, their star reviews are similar. One of them has more reviews, and they both have 4.5 stars. So the price is making a huge difference in this case. And but the profit is lower. There's when you're under $10, you actually get a discount on your fulfillment fee. So the profit isn't as much lower as you would think, but you're still gonna lose out on some profit. So this guy on the left is trying to grab for more profit, whereas the other guy is looking at cash flow. And so there are ways to, improve your scalability, even if you're making less profit on the product. Of course, you have to look into how the tariffs factor in now. But once you do this, you can potentially find even more profit. So, like I mentioned, there's a program called Low Price FBA. Under $10, your fees drop significantly in fulfillment fees. And then so you're looking at back to being able to scale faster with these methods, and then finding opportunities to even squeeze more profit because you're getting less profit, but there are ways to regain profit as well. If you're selling 50 units a day and you have an MOQ that causes you to have to buy 6 months of supply, for example, that gets you into some difficulty in terms of the cash flow. You might be able to negotiate a price break, but only if you've got that higher velocity. So maybe you can get a price break at 15 or 1600 units. That's only 4 months of supply, and you could potentially negotiate down, let's say 5 cents. So you're saving 5 cents, you're getting a little bit more profit, and you're keeping less inventory, so the storage cost goes down as well. All right. So, one of the things I also wanted to talk about, like I mentioned, is payment terms. So, if you're talking to your supplier and you want to improve your cash flow, you need to start looking at how can you negotiate payment terms with your supplier. So, there's actually something we call progressive payment terms, and it's just changing the structure of how you pay. So an idea is ordering 3 to 4 months worth of stock and you only pay the down payment. One of the most common terms is 30% down, 70% either upon shipping or upon arrival at port. And so that gives you that heavy lump sum of 70% before your inventory has even arrived and checked in at FBA. So you're expending that uh, cost before you've even started making money. So we want to look at how do you disperse your cash flow over time. So you place your down payment, and then you could send your inventory drip feeding on a monthly basis. This is also how you extend the uh, tariff payments because you're going to pay 70% down and then you're going to pay those tariff payments on top of that. So you're going to get hit both ways before your inventory even arrives. So paying for that inventory up front in terms of down payment and then drip feeding it and negotiating with your supplier. I only want to pay on the inventory that ships. So I'm going to send a month's worth of inventory. You're going to store the remainder. Usually your supplier will store inventory for, let's say, up to 3 months or so without charging you. So you're storing this inventory, you've only paid 30%. They're not charging you to store it, and then you're paying the remainder as it ships out or as it arrives to the port. So you're lengthening that amount of time. And then the other thing to factor is you could try to negotiate terms with your freight forwarder as well as to how long you have to pay that bill. So the way that that factors out when we look at an actual cash flow projection, I've given some examples of a product and then launching a second product a few months later. And so on the left, we're looking at our current payment structure where we're 30% down and then 70%, let's say 60 days later. And then you launch that new product and you have the same terms. You see where we get into some trouble where we're going to run out of cash. So we might get into a bind where we have to scramble to figure that out, or we might not launch this product or wait to launch this product when we have more cash flow. So that reduces our ability to scale up as fast as we maybe want to because we don't have enough access to cash to grow. And then here we look at the payment terms changing, where we order that 3 months worth of inventory and then we ship out over time. And then we place a new order. Then we launch another product and we're redistributing our cash so that we don't have that area where we run out of money and we have more cash in the bank. You'll have the same profit, but you'll have the cash available to scale because you're not giving it all out at once. We
Chelsea,
have some questions. Uh-huh.
one thing we're running on time, and I don't know if you wanna jump into the last part. I know that you are gonna offer or we're giving out in the workbook a lot of these exercises.
Yeah.
So people can get it and take it home. Chelsea, if you wanna show the optimization tools.
Yeah, we got through the majority of things, and there is a lot involved in some of the items that we're looking to share. One of the things is we have a bunch of optimization tools. So if you scan this QR code, I think we also will probably drop
Can you
you.
make the slides bigger? I just see
Oh,
your presenter screen.
oh, wrong one. Okay. Um, yeah.
Yeah, so we're gonna give you, before you go, real quick, three QR codes that you can scan. So the
Hmm.
first one is this, the optimization tools we talked at the beginning. Every single piece in the business. These are free tools. You can use them from the master carton calculator. That, by the way, I just want to mention this. Like Lynn was asking the questions, what are the requirements on the boxes? And I said like 50 pounds, 25, 25, 20 pounds, and 150 units. That's the limit. That's the maximum amount that the box or the carton can weight or measure, or the amount of units that it can have. So you can definitely do it smaller, less weight, and less units, but it's the maximum. So that's what
Yeah.
I was sharing there. So you have the master carton calculator that will help you to rearrange your cartons in a way that you can, utilize the $5 rule. The free product resizer will can help you lower your fulfillment fees, potentially get you into the climate pledge friendly program and or the shipping non-product packaging. The promo fee calculator, we're also gonna add here, you don't see in the screen, but it's gonna be there, the tariff calculator, and obviously refunds, and especially what we talk on the reimbursements. Yeah, tariff calculator is there. Then the
Hmm.
other thing, it's the sources. So if you go to the other part, this is the workbook, and this is part of what we utilize in the last workshop when we talk about profitability. So if you scan the QR code, that's around the margins workbook, profitability, capital utilization, and it will ask you some cash flow questions that you can start thinking better, because the examples that Chelsea was giving on, oh yeah, in month 7, I'm already running out of cash. What do I need to do to renegotiate or do better with my suppliers, or the way that you pay your tariff, and all of that? And the last one, which is probably my favorite and most important, this is the tool. This is the profit flow tool that Chelsea designed under the SoStock software, that you're gonna have access. If you join the waitlist, it's super important that you put your information there. The people that are coming from this webinar will have priority over everybody else. This is a beta, and the people that are using the beta are having the most like amount of like insights and breakthroughs on how to make better decisions, especially with what's happening with the tariff, and how they need to plan for the future, so they don't end up at one point in this year with no cash in the bank. So make sure to scan it. Make sure to get it. Thank you so much, guys, for being here. Appreciate your time, your questions, and yeah, it's interesting times to be in the e-commerce space, but there is hope and there is a way to navigate all of these challenges. We're here to support you, to help you. If you want to reach out, feel free to connect with me and Chelsea on LinkedIn, Vanessa Hung and Chelsea Cohen. And yeah, we'll see you.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.